Here's what Dave and his fellow controllers have to do. If they put big planes in front of small planes, they have to leave bigger gaps to account for the vortex the big planes leave in their wake. So instead, they try to bunch planes of similar sizes together to reduce the gaps.
So when I am in a plane circling around somewhere over the southeast of England, that's because you're shuffling my plane into the right kind of queue to get the most out of the runway.
That's correct, and I don't apologise for that. It's all about maximum runway usage.
Heathrow often gets a bad press, but really you can only marvel at the resourcefulness of the people who make it work within all the constraints. And in a way, it's a good example of a British approach to infrastructure. You underprovide it and you use ingenuity to get by. We're world champions at muddling through. As I say, you can marvel at it and then remember, muddling through can only get you so far.
We're at a crunch point because Heathrow's full. Other airports have space, but Heathrow is special. It's one of the world's hub airports. That means passengers don't just fly here to get to London, they fly here to catch planes onto somewhere else. Now, Britain's aviation bosses argue that's good for us all, as it allows them to lay on routes which otherwise wouldn't be viable, routes to parts of the world which might be crucial to the future of the British economy.
We're not very well connected to growth economies. I've stopped using emerging economies because, China is the second biggest economy in the world. Brazil has overtaken the UK, so you can't really call these emerging. They've emerged, but they're growing at a significant pace. And if we're serious about playing a leading role in the global economy, you're going to have to connect to these destinations. And that's really going to be a challenge for Heathrow and for the UK.
Good evening. In the coming age of jumbo jets and supersonic speed, how and where will we make room for new airports in England's green and pleasant land?
You see, this question's nothing new. The problem of how to maintain airport capacity in the southeast has bedeviled successive governments for decades.
London faces erosion of its position as the hub of international air transport.
And now the issue is back. Do we build an extra runway at Heathrow, as Willie Walsh wants, or a brand new airport in the Thames? All options are being looked at by a government review. None is easy. Now, if you build a third runway at Heathrow, is that going to do it? Or are you going to be saying, in 30 years' time, we need a fourth runway or a fifth runway, at which point we might say, why didn't we build an airport somewhere else where we could do all of that in the first place?
I think that is the question that needs to be answered. My own view is that a third runway isn't the long-term solution. I think a third runway gives you 25 years. It keeps you in the game. So, you're quite right. I think it would be wrong for me to try and convince people that if you build a third runway at Heathrow, that's it, and we're now future-proofed. With the projected growth in air travel, I don't think it would do enough. But at least it gives you time to consider options.
But notice, almost all of those options are in the south of England, which means that airport capacity is a classic example of a very British infrastructure dilemma.
Here's the problem. Britain needs more infrastructure, but the very places that it needs it most are the places that are most crowded, have most people. And yet it's the place where the crowds are that there isn't room to build anything, where you meet most objections. Yet when it comes to a decision over airports, where and whether you build another hub, well, this touches on issues around where we expect people to live, what kind of economy we want to have. These are issues way above the pay grade of people involved in aviation. These are questions of grand national strategy. Difficult questions, mind you, but they really can't be ducked.
North, south, east, west, hub airports or alternative investments. There's a huge menu of infrastructure opportunities in Britain. You can argue about them all, but just because decisions are difficult doesn't mean we shouldn't face up to them. And there's an additional economic reason for looking at how much we invest in our future. To understand it, an example from our past.
It's pretty obvious that we have the power to change our infrastructure. What's more interesting is that infrastructure has the power to change us, to be transformative, to alter our behaviour, our way of thinking, often in very unexpected ways.
This rather beautiful locomotive is Planet, a replica of the very first one to run down these tracks in 1830 as part of the Liverpool and Manchester Railway, Britain's first intercity line.
Warm up here.
Today, it's part of Manchester's Museum of Science and Industry. But back then, it was 30 miles of track, which changed Britain forever.
This was built in 92, but it's pretty well the same as the one that was built in 1830.
Visually it is, but it's made with modern materials, and we've got modern safety features, like brakes.
Did they really not have brakes originally?
They were more interested in making it go.
The original motivation for the Liverpool and Manchester Railway had been to carry freight. Local businessmen had wanted to link the two cities. But guess what? Once the line had been built, it actually turned out that people wanted to travel as well. And pretty soon, passengers were the dominant traffic. What had happened was the line had transformed the geography of the region in a way that no one had anticipated. This railway, it took the brakes off the development of the economy of the region.
Yes, here in Manchester, well, of course, not only were the needs of the existing cotton mills satisfied, but a lot of other people said, right, now we've got the opportunity of setting up further cotton mills, and the textile industry expanded very quickly. And as soon as the railway opened and made it so much easier to get the cotton imports, the food imports, and all the other 101 other things that were required here in Manchester, then of course the numbers of ships coming through the port of Liverpool instantly doubled. You know, it was a huge increase. That made an enormous difference to the port of Liverpool.
You buy a railway and you get a flourishing port for free. The Liverpool-Manchester Railway showed how infrastructures had a transformative effect on Britain's economy in the past. When you bring people together, you create new economic opportunities that you couldn't have anticipated. There are huge benefits to shrinking distances between people. It made our economy more productive back then, and there's evidence it can do that now. And there are plenty of ways to do it. Go further and faster in linking the cities of the north of England, for example. Or go further and faster in creating space for London to grow.
We can use infrastructure to bring people closer together. But the question is, where should we focus our investment? If we spend all our money around London, as it sometimes feels we are doing, well, then you drive people to London. It becomes self-fulfilling. That's not a very good idea. If you don't spend money in London, you invest it all around Manchester, for example, well, then you're in danger of choking the economy in London, which is a fast-growing part of the country. So that's not a good idea. Isn't there a case for doing both, for investing everywhere? Maybe we just have to give our country some options.
This government and the last have recognised these arguments. And this is their big hope for bringing us closer together. It's Curzon Street in Birmingham, built by Robert Stephenson in the 1830s as the magnificent terminus for the London-Birmingham railway line. Today, it's rather faded, but there is a plan. It's the proposed site for the new Birmingham station for High Speed 2, the new fast rail line from London to Birmingham, and in time beyond that to the north. The government hopes it can shift the nation's centre of economic gravity. Doug Oakervee is a wily infrastructure veteran and the Brit who oversaw the building of Hong Kong's new airport in the middle of the South China Sea in the 1990s. Today, he's got an even bigger job on his hands, making High Speed 2 become a reality.
Right, Doug, looks like a bit of a wasteland at the moment. Some might call it a nature reserve or a park, but what is this going to be if you get your way?
Well, this is going to be the real hub of High Speed 2. This is Birmingham Station, with the platforms going off in that direction. And the old Curzon Street station that was built in 1838 will be brought back in to the new station and refurbished completely. So bringing the original history of Birmingham's railway from 1838 up to the modern day.
Infrastructure has the power to change the geography of the nation. We're talking about shrinking the distance between Birmingham and London. What does that do? Does that accentuate the concentration of activity in London, which already has a lot of activity in it, or does it disperse activity out of London?
I think it'll probably do both things. I mean, it'll make life very much easier for those who want to commute to London. But I think the key thing is with HS2, when it develops itself and establishes it here, and the development that takes place around it will encourage many more companies to Birmingham, which in the sense is a better location for a lot of industries, and there will be greater connectivities between the north and the south. I mean, some might like to say it'll bridge the north-south divide.
High Speed 2 might bridge the north-south divide, or it might suck yet more economic activity down south. As we saw with the Liverpool-Manchester Railway, infrastructure often has unexpected effects which nobody bargained for. So until we've built it, no one really knows.
Like so much infrastructure, it's really hard to know what the effect of HS2 would be. You can do your detailed passenger projections, but frankly, you're likely to be way off the mark with them. No, with transformative infrastructure, it bears on much, much bigger issues. HS2 isn't really about journey times, it's about the whole shape of our nation. Are we a country called Britain with a capital called London, or are we a country called London with a huge great suburb called Britain? That is the really difficult question facing us.
The case for investing more in infrastructure is to make this difficult question easier, to build space for the economy to grow in all parts of the country. But wait, there's a case against too, not just the financial cost, but the effect development has on our quality of life and environment. It's a case that has to be answered. This is the practice of Norman Foster, a British architect with a global reputation. He's designed infrastructure around the world, including airports in Hong Kong and Beijing, and he has his own vision for how Britain could and should invest more. I've come to see how he answers the critics, those who think more infrastructure means concreting over Britain.
We probably have the greatest heritage in the world in terms of inspirational individuals. You look at Brunel. He created tunnels, bridges, ports, ships. I mean, the breadth of that ambition, we should be creating in that spirit for present generations as they grow older, future generations unborn.
Do you recognise that there are a lot of things we want to leave younger, future generations? We want to leave them a country that is intact, that is beautiful, and that where nature has been preserved. And for every Brunel fan out there saying Brunel is the sort of Great Britain who it represents the best of our nation.
And there are lots of others.
And there's another one saying it's the countryside that represents the greatest asset we have. It's that. And I wonder whether at least you recognise that there's this, perhaps a bit of a conflict.
There's always a conflict. It's always a balance. Of course, at the same time, we can preserve the countryside. We can integrate infrastructure in the countryside in another great tradition.